There's no case too big, no case too small. When you need help, just call Bandel. Rescue Ranger. Bandel. When there's danger. No, it never fails. Once they're involved, somehow whatever's wrong gets solved.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Pre-Accident Podcast. I'm Todd Conklin, your charming and multi-talented host for today's podcast adventure. Hey, thanks for tuning in. As always, it is really great to spend time with you. You're going to like today's podcast. I know I say that a lot, but again, this time I really mean it, because this podcast is one I've been looking forward to a long time. I think I'm about to introduce you to perhaps the most experienced, high-risk, high-reliability safety manager I've ever met. And certainly don't take my word for it. You don't have to go very far to find people who would completely and wholeheartedly agree with me. And that makes for a really, really good podcast. Holy cow, it is busy. Man, the summer is zooming by. I cannot believe we're midsummer already, but I guess we are. That's how that works. I've just been crazy fun this summer. I've really focused on doing kind of fun stuff and sort of rediscovering my life, as it were. And so, you know, I've just spent a lot of time this year kind of hanging out. Did a huge river trip, really nice river trip. Went down the Green this year, which is a river I've done a bunch of times. So these are multi-day rafting trips. And to be really honest, I go with all my friends who are kind of rafters for a living. And so it's a little bit of a busman's holiday. If you ever want to go on a raft trip, go with people who raft trip for a living, and they kind of know how to do it. So it's super casual. I don't want to say anything, but I should tell you one little bit of information. So you carry everything out. You leave nothing, absolutely not even micro trash on the ground. And one of the things that's either the least pleasant part of a raft trip or the most important part of a raft trip, or both, is the fact that you use basically a big ammo can as a bathroom. Now, it's called a groover, and the reason it's called a groover is because when you sit on it, it puts grooves in your bottom area, your bottom. And the groover is, well, it's an interesting part of the adventure. But you're carrying all that waste out with you because you don't want to leave any waste in with you. When you raft with people who do this for a living, the groover is much more akin to a bathroom, to the throne in your house. I don't want to go too deep into this, but let's just say this. There's a very good magazine rack. It's carried with you to every wilderness spot you go to, and you spend a lot of time reading really, really good magazines, and they're good ones. I mean, they're heady, like The Nation, and just all sorts of interesting things, and it always leads to very interesting discussions around the campfire. It's very fun. That is my summer in a nutshell. I can't tell you how excited I am by this goofy podcast, and part of it is because of you. You're telling your friends, and you're getting other people to listen. You're probably overzealous and saying, yeah, you ought to really hear this. I'm not sure how interested other people are in understanding safety differently, but golly, we're doing our best to try to get people included in this conversation, and that's a good thing. I think anything we can do to build a community of thought around these new ideas and to support each other, and quite honestly to encourage each other, is probably money in the bank. And that leads us to today's podcast. Ken, I'm going to let Ken introduce himself, but suffice it to say that if you wanted to find probably the person in the world with the most experience in search and rescue, it would be Ken Phillips. If you went to a meeting on search and rescue, some international consortium held in, I don't know, let's put it in Brussels, probably it's a pretty good bet that Ken Phillips would be the rock star guy who gave the presentations. Ken is this amazing guy who is just so generous with his time and knowledge because he cares so much about keeping people safe in high-risk emergency operations. If you're a pilot, if you're a firefighter, whatever you are, I can't imagine you won't find this podcast interesting. It's detailed. He talks a lot about what he's thinking about, what he's reading, but mostly it's an introduction into the mind of somebody who really has, for the last 30 years or so, only thought about these issues. And it's so great to hear him talk. So without much more fanfare, let's get deep into the podcast, and I'll talk to you on the backside of it. Did you like the introduction? I hope so. I'm always trying to think of ways to make it a little more creative. So without any further ado, here is Ken Phillips. So introduce yourself to us. That'd be really cool. That's a good way to start this.
Well, good morning. My name is Ken Phillips, and I'm the branch chief for search and rescue with the National Park Service. So what that means is I manage the search and rescue program around the country.
How did you get that job? What a great job. How did you get that?
Well, I previously worked for 27 years at Grand Canyon, involved in managing the search and rescue program and emergency services there. So over time, I've developed quite a bit of experience with high-risk operations.
So you just kind of outlasted everybody?
Yeah. Okay, you saw right through my.
Well, that's. I'm so excited to get to talk to you about this notion of high risk operations, because I go around the world telling people that I think of all the highly reliable organizations I get to see, I think you guys are probably one of the best and most attainable, and you don't even you guys don't even brag about it.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot, Todd. What makes you believe that we're good at what we do?
Well, there's a couple things. One is you are good at what you do, so the data's pretty good. You do lots and lots of high risk work with very few negative consequences and failures, right? I mean, right?
That's true, but I got to point out that in the National Park Service, in the history of our agency, we've had 32 people die performing search and rescue operations. Now, not all of them were National Park Service employees.
Right.
Some of them were military, Civil Air Patrol, and volunteers. But we totally understand that we can easily have a bad day.
Well, this is. I mean, I think you're on to the very reason I'm so excited to talk to you, is because I think telling the world you're a highly reliable organization does not make you a highly reliable organization. And when you look at Wyke and Sutcliffe and the sort of the tome of material that says this is what a highly reliable team looks like, they're attributes, but they're not recipes. And what I think is interesting about that is that teams that are very, very reliable, fixated on reliability, like you guys, I mean, you really are that way. You don't see yourselves as highly reliable, because to see yourselves as highly reliable would be to take away sort of the basic foundation of what keeps you highly reliable, which is a constant sense of unease and a constant belief that you can learn more, do more, and be better. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And I look at industry to see what we can borrow from them.
Right. And industry wants to look at you and see what we can learn from you. And we're in this kind of weird circle, this circle of benevolent butt kissing, but it's real. I mean, I think it's really, really an interesting phenomenon. And the podcast, a couple podcasts ago with Mark Yeston, when he said, the thing that makes us think about safety in one word, and he said, was you. How'd you get to a point where you sort of represent reliability to Rangers like Mark Yeston?
No, I've become passionate about situational awareness and crew resource management. And years ago, a ranger turned me on to a article about teams working on flight decks of aircraft carriers and how they were all empowered to speak up. And what I have learned is that you can't simply give a message once and expect to change culture. You have to have repetitive messaging in multiple ways, constantly reinforcing the message that you're trying to get through about safety, speaking up in high-risk operations, the importance of communications in teams, and not assuming that one another knows what you're thinking, those sorts of things. So that's remarkable. And these multiple messages. Well, let's start from the beginning. How did your journey sort of, the first time you picked up that article and read about CRM, crew resource management, how did your journey start and where did it take you? What are you reading now versus what you were reading then? Yeah, I was reading magazine articles then, and now I read books.
Right, yeah, it's changed a lot. Who are you reading?
There's an excellent book out by a guy named Todd Conklin.
Oh, I've heard of him, yes, and that's why he was at the post office this morning, was getting his next excellent book junked together to the publisher. Super late. So.
But, yeah, I've things by Carl Weick, Gary Klein.
Nice.
A lot of psychologists, Sutcliffe, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And sideline topics. You're catching me off guard. I wish I had a bibliography list.
Oh, no, you're fine. It's just a conversation. I mean, this is perfect.
Because there's a great book I read on multitasking, how it's a myth.
Yeah.
I could remember the name of it. The author's name is really hard to pronounce, but it's mostly looks at aviation, but it talks about the fallacy of multitasking, and I think that's an excellent thing because in what we do in emergency operations, we're trying to do many things at once, and what it reinforces is you need help. You are one brain, as I tell people, and harness the power of your team. As that book, The Wisdom of the Crowds.
Right. What a great book.
It is. And so those are sorts of things that I read and look at. And like the Checklist Manifesto. That's another great book. And before that, I'd learned that you got to develop memory aids. In the government, we write a lot of policies and procedures, but what those wind up doing is they go up on a bookshelf and they oftentimes collect dust, or people have a hard time recalling what that is. And so I learned a long time ago, as people say, I make laminated cards for people, but briefing cards, debriefing cards, checklists, for a lot of the operations that we do. And they laugh at me, but they use them.
And they like them. I mean, they work really well. As Gwande says, they're these memory joggers. They sort of cause people to think about what they think about in the right times, in the right order, in the right place.
Yeah, we all as humans, we make mistakes. If we can recognize that in advance and strive to work on things that will keep us from making those mistakes.
So as branch chief for search and rescue for the Park Service, how big, is your operation nationwide?
It is. There's over 400 Park Service units. Now, not all of them have search and rescue programs.
Right.
And my job isn't to run out every time there's a search and rescue emergency somewhere. It's program management. So I'm trying to troubleshoot our weaknesses and make us, to borrow the term, a more high reliability organization. But we do make mistakes. I just recently had to investigate a training accident that could have been fatal. We dropped somebody during a rope rescue training exercise. They wound up with significant injuries, and I used what's called a facilitated learning analysis process to publish a report and put that out. It just went out this morning in the Park Service. And what that is, take that accident and go through the sense making of how did it get to, how did those people who were involved in it, what were they thinking at the time, and why did they make the decisions that they did? And it's rather than looking at it in hindsight, which is always 20/20 about somebody making a mistake, but in their own words, I tried to capture what occurred, and we've shared that within our agency. It's a non-punitive report.
And do people like those kind of reports? I mean, are they well accepted, well received?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the people that were involved in the accident, they appreciated the manner in which it was investigated, and they were allowed to really state exactly what they were thinking, and it helps provide context for when an accident, as you know, when an accident occurs, nobody believes they're going to have an accident. And so all of us have had situations in our lives that we're probably lucky to get away from. And in this particular situation, where not following our established procedures, led to the unfortunate outcome. And it reinforces why we've got some safety practices in place. And every program that does rope rescue in the Park Service can learn from that mistake.
That's amazing. That's really that facilitated learning, that we call them learning teams, but ways to somehow talk to the people who own the work, who actually do the work, and in their words capture what they were thinking, that local rationale. It's a powerful way to sort of bring learning into it. And it's interesting, Ken, because other industries are now becoming really interested in using that type of learning for events, near events, close calls, safeguard tests, whatever you want to call them, to get that information out there. In your 27 years, if you had to give advice to somebody starting a program, somebody in a factory that makes pencil erasers, what would you say? How would you get them to think about reliability in a different way?
If you believe that, developing a safe program is having a big baseball bat that you wave around to get compliance, it's the wrong tool. You got to have buy-in by everyone, and truly, and I know it sounds corny, but you're developing a culture, and to get that culture, you constantly have to talk about it. Talk about it every opportunity you can when people come together, when you're having employee meetings or shift briefings or tailgates or whatever it is, because you reinforce that message. Then pretty soon that message is not just your message, it's the message is carried out by everyone else. And that's what it takes over time to get buy-in. I know that in the program I was involved in at Grand Canyon, to establish that as the culture, it took many, many years of work. And so reinforcement, the message, and getting buy-in. I know it probably sounds kind of corny, especially to somebody who might be a supervisor, like, yeah, right. But truly people want to go home every day with all their fingers and toes, and so make them an active part of it. It's buy-in by the employees.
That, I think, is a powerful message. Now, you guys, like when you were at the Grand Canyon for all those years, it's interesting to me because one of the things you got to do is you got to do this all the time. So you got to practice being a highly reliable organization by practicing being a highly reliable organization. Does that make sense? Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't be proficient at something you plan for and never do, or do so infrequently. I look at the Miracle on the Hudson with Sullenberger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. There is so many ways that could have gone wrong, and he got it right. But he had mentally prepared for it. In our case at the Grand Canyon, we do it's a high-volume rescue operation with over 300 helicopter medevacs out of the canyon every year. So
God, that's just amazing. That's amazing.
We became very proficient at it because we did it quite a bit. but we debrief those operations, and we say you're trying to achieve perfection. Things can always be a little bit better. And the question is, if we were to go back out tomorrow and do this exact same mission, what would you want to do a little bit differently? And in advance of an operation, ask people when you brief a plan at the end of it, because you want to solicit everyone's feedback, and that's part of our briefing process that we use. And ask people, how could my plan fail? And as the team leader, again, you're just one brain.
Right.
But somebody else in the group may have a better idea, and I've seen that happen. I've had had helicopter pilots or rescue team members speak up and see an alternative approach or technique that we could employ that involved less risk, and I failed to see that in the heat of battle. So again,
how did you, with 300 plus missions a year, how did you guys safeguard against things like complacency, like the fact that a helicopter rescue for you guys became normal? How do you safeguard against that? Because I think that's got a lot of power to people out in the world doing other kinds of work.
Absolutely. In addition to the procedures that we would have on an annual basis for our helicopter rescue training, we'd look at helicopter rescue accidents that had occurred around the world the previous year, and that helps understand how a catastrophic accident could occur. That kind of reinforces, these things do go bad. Additionally, we had incorporated the tool from the Coast Guard, the GAR risk assessment.
Right, yeah.
And again, that tool, which allows each participant independently to score how they subjectively feel about different risk categories, it's not about the number at the bottom line. It's a tool to get people discussing about the risk of a mission. That's what it is. It's a conversation starter. It's a tool to facilitate discussion.
Now you're saying something pretty important there. So let me rephrase it and see if I got it. You're not really talking about the specific risk as if it were predictable and understandable. The tool really allows you to have a discussion about how the team will manage that risk in the system. Is that fair or is that wrong?
Well, pretty much. I mean, there's a scoring factor that you put from 0 to 10 for particular categories, and one might be team selection. And somebody's thinking to themselves, "Geez, everybody here is brand new or a trainee," and they might give a particular high factor to that. But it doesn't really matter if they put a 5 or an 8 or even a 10. The point is that as we bring all these scores together, it facilitates discussion about that factor. And we go, whoa, maybe we should change out a few people on the team here and get some experienced folks involved in this.
Do you guys think you manage risk, or do you teach risk competency?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
I'm full. If you come to my house, I have bags of loaded questions that I save.
I don't know. I'd throw it back at you and say I think what we teach is risk awareness. But, all it takes is one day when people are distracted or whatever. I realized that safety and being safe is a very narrow margin.
And kind of ethereal when you try to define it. Like, I don't even know how you would define what being safe is.
Yeah. Well, I think you can only post-incident say, we had a safe operation, but ahead of time, you are just hoping for the best.
So would you say you manage reliability in search and rescue based on luck? Because I would say no, but you might say yes.
Maybe it's because I realize that all it takes is on one given day, one person getting a little overly excited and deciding to take some shortcuts. And that's all it takes.
But the word shortcut always scares me.
Yeah.
Because what's the difference between a shortcut, a bad idea, and a process improvement, a creativity, problem solving in the field, a good idea?
Well, just like in industry where you're using equipment where you got to put a safeguard in place between the employee operating it.
Right.
Same thing in high risk operations. We use PPE. And for example, we have rules about how close you can be to swift water before you got to have personal flotation device on,
right.
Or if you're going to be at the edge of a cliff, you got to have a restraint line in place. But, that's not to say that everybody is 100% compliant. And so all it takes is one person to get a little too close to swift water in their, street clothes, or somebody at the responder gets at the edge of a cliff and they're not clipped to a restraint line, and something bad happens. And that we've taught and trained them and reinforced it over and over. And to me, one of the best safeguards is their fellow employees around them. So if I go out and I try to take a shortcut, maybe I'm not wearing my helmet or PPE, I'm hoping that my fellow employees will look over at me and say, "Hey, Ken, put on your helmet, or put on that restraint line, or put on that PFD." So,
and do they do that? I mean, do they have that kind of open and honest communication with each other?
Well, in a national program, I got to say that, it's like many factories all over the country.
Right.
And each one has their own little culture. Okay? Some programs are really dialed in, and others have room for improvement. And that's what keeps me busy in my job.
So how are you doing? How are you helping these little factories, these little SARs, these little search and rescue teams all around the country be successful?
I try to, hopefully through cross-pollination, taking if we can, like when we get together for any kind of meetings or trainings, we try to cross-pollinate ideas from the strong, healthy programs to the programs that need some attention or improvement. And so that's how we try to do it.
And so
let them know what the industry best practices. Reinforce that message to them.
And you know which programs are good and solid and which programs are growing and developing?
Yeah.
And that's just because you have access and experience.
Yeah. And, it's what you hear. I get lots of different, there's lots of different ways to pick up on the kind of the pulse of what's going on. But one thing that you taught me about was the interviewing process in the workplace. That was a great thing I borrowed from you, but it highlighted areas of weakness for us.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's all about learning. I mean, if you ask me to observe what you do really, really well, what you guys do really well, I think you're very good at it, but the whole agency is really good. It's you really understand the value of being constantly improving, of constantly learning.
Oh, yeah. The more I learn about what I do as far as search and rescue goes, I'm just amazed. I think I just feel like such a dullard, because it's like, man, how have I managed to stay alive this far?
Well, I think that humility is what keeps you safe. It's what keeps your programs forward moving, and it's what sort of has made you guys what you are. In fact, it's kind of right back around to where we started this conversation. I think one of the amazing things about you guys is that you're so reliable and you believe you aren't.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome, man. What a great conversation. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely, Todd.
That's amazing. Now, can people Do you go to meet? I know you go around the world talking about this stuff. How can people tap into this knowledge? You got a book coming out or anything?
I wish I had time to write it. I've got some stuff though. That facilitated learning analysis.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's on our internal Park Service website. I'll be giving it to the Mountain Rescue Association to post on their website. Do you have a site that you can put it on? You're welcome to.
I don't. Maybe
I'll throw it out there at you. I'll put it on your shoulders.
Okay, that's no fair is fair. I'll accept that burden. It's a beautiful burden to carry. Yeah, I'll see if I can get it out there and make it available because it's available. You don't mind if the public looks at the way you learn.
No, not at all.
And I will tell you, if we let the public see the way you learn, I think it will save lives and make the world a better place.
Well, you in your book talked about close calls and near misses as being gifts.
Yeah.
I think that is a very powerful word to associate with that. We have to take those gifts and make use of them.
I agree. Thanks for your time today, man.
You bet, Todd. Great talking with you.
So what'd you think? There was a career's worth of learning in 30 minutes. Man, I don't know. I'm definitely going to have to listen to that one again. There was so much there from somebody who does this for a living every single day and has done it for many, many years. Ken, thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for the access to that document. Who knows how I'm going to get that out there, but we'll think of something. Stay tuned and more details will follow. Until then, thanks for listening. It's fun to spend time with you. And thanks for subscribing. Tell your friends because more is better, and that's always helpful. And until then, learn something every single day and cross-pollinate that information. I like that idea. Have a lot of fun, and for goodness sakes, be safe.